I think most, if not all, fans of the Transformers franchise, both diehard and casual, are all looking for something new, something fresh, something not directed by Michael Bay, something good for once. And here comes Bumblebee, directed by Travis Knight, set in the 80s with an all-new cast, completely separating itself from the previous franchise. Bumblebee stands completely on its own as a fun, entertaining, and quite hilarious coming-of-age story for both Bumblebee and Hailee Steinfeld's Charlie Watson. And I really do like the first Transformers movie, but this is what the franchise should have been from the start. This film has a very simple plot. It's a story that you've seen a million times before, and it has a lot of comparisons and homages to E.T., and, you know, honestly, that's not a bad thing. There's one scene in particular that you see a little bit in the trailer of Bumblebee kind of exploring the house. And, you know, at one point he even grabs a soda can and it explodes and everything. And it is so similar to the scene in E.T., I couldn't help but make the comparisons. The plot itself can be put side by side with E.T. as well. An alien comes to Earth and finds comfort in a young human, and they bond and learn from one another. But in the meantime, there is a government plot to retrieve this alien with the intent of protecting mankind. The main difference between the two is that there are two other aliens, Decepticons, that are hunting down Bumblebee to retrieve him as well. The reason this doesn't bother me is it's done so well, and the characters are what make this film so endearing. Hailee Steinfeld is a star, and I absolutely loved her in The Edge of 17. She was endearing and lovable in that film just as much as she is in this one. Her performance and her relationship with Bee is what really makes this film special. Her character also has a really interesting backstory that also gives her as an actress a lot more to work with. None of this could have worked without the title character Bumblebee, and Travis Knight really nailed this aspect of this movie. There is a great opening action scene that introduces the character and also introduces the fact that he can't talk, which makes it very difficult for him to get by. This really does define Bee's personality so well. Him learning to communicate and live up to the mission put upon himself was a great arc for the completely CG character, which I also found the design to be a million times better than any of the other Transformers films. I wasn't expecting this at all, but there is some real growth in how he learns from Charlie and how Charlie learns from Bee. This is what elevates a simple plot to greater levels. This really is the heart of the film, and their relationship along with the situation that they're put into allows for a lot of funny situations and a lot of really great humor, which I was completely surprised by. The trailers for this movie did look pretty funny, and I had hope that this movie would be funnier than the Michael Bay movies because his humor just did not work at all, and this movie had our theater laughing, like just dying. There is one scene in particular with Charlie, Memo, and Bee going out at night, and it was so funny, and once you guys see the scene, you'll know what I'm talking about. I don't want to spoil it, but the entire auditorium, we had a packed house. I got to see this movie a little bit early, so everybody was super excited to see this movie, and everybody was just dying laughing at this one scene. Where I think some people will have issues with this film, mainly the fans of the previous Transformers movies, is in the action. Not that the action is bad in this movie, the action is actually really good, but there's not nearly as much as the other movies, whereas those movies are just non-stop action, CG, just like, you know, thrown at your face. This one is a little more subtle and has its action, but it's at, you know, more important moments, more like elevated moments in the movie, and it's not just completely, you know, CGI action everywhere. It's a lot more subtle, and I actually like that. This film takes its time to really show us the characters and the relationships between them and the growth and the actual character arcs. And so that's why I didn't mind the lack of action, but I can understand if some people walk out a little bit disappointed in that. Also, most, if not all, of the scenes with the military were just kind of underwhelming, and John Cena was not really good in this movie. I mean, he did fine for what he was given, but his character just wasn't that interesting at all, and the whole government plot was just kind of, you know, pushed to the side, whereas the focus was really on Bee and Charlie Watson. And I also wanted to add my thoughts on the continuity of the Transformers franchise, and I honestly do believe that this movie is a straightforward reboot of the series, basically ignoring everything else that happened previously, and I really hope this is true. There's one scene in particular that happens towards the end of the film that kind of just retcons everything that happened before. If I remember those original films correctly, something happened in this movie that happened in the original one. If that's the case, then that couldn't have happened, you know, in the early 2000s, like in 2007 when the Transformers movie came out, since this movie takes place in the 80s. So I do believe that this is a complete reboot, and I am so excited for where they can go with this franchise, and this is a series that I'm actually excited to see what they're going to do and where they're going to go with next. So as you can tell, I highly recommend you guys see this movie, and although you might not get something completely original, you're in for a purely entertaining and fun time at the movies with a lot of heart and just really, really solid movie in the Transformers franchise. Bumblebee was great, so go check this movie out when it is released this week, and yeah, so that'll be my review. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel to see more reviews just like this one. I'll see you guys all in the next one.